By the summer of 2014, I had just finished middle school in China, and my parents were deciding to send me over to America to continue my education. They wanted me to get into an elite American university, and the best way to do that was by attending an American high school. Before I boarded the plane in a small Western airport in China, my mom grabbed my shoulders and she said, "Remember, don't talk to the Chinese kids." I'm joking, of course. She said it in Chinese. She didn't speak English. But she meant what she said. To my mom, the best way to immerse myself into the American culture, the best way to get the most out of an authentic American education was by minimizing contact with my compatriots. And so I heeded her advice for the next 4 years. I didn't talk to any Chinese kids, literally. I also pretended that I loved country music. I also pretended that I didn't want to eat dumplings for every meal of the day. But I got tired of all that pretending, of faking to be someone that I was not. My English got really good, but I was tired after all. Luckily, I had a break from all that pretending when I came to Emory, when I realized my uniqueness and differences was actually appreciated and valued. I mean, here are two of my best friends since the first day of college. The three of us would walk around campus and we would routinely get stopped by camera crews. They would come up to us and they say things like, "How do you guys like Emory so far?" And they would say also things like, "Where are you guys from?" But it doesn't matter what the first two questions are. The third question was always, "Can we take a picture of you three?" The first time we got stopped, I was like, "Wow, Emory's really nice. They really care about how we feel." So I let them take our pictures. The second time we got stopped, I was like, "Again, you guys are really nice, but sure, take your picture, whatever." The third time we got stopped is when I realized they probably just wanted to take pictures of us so they could put that on the admission brochures. But I let them anyways because they gave us free cookies. Point is, universities around America are now increasingly realizing the importance of having students from different backgrounds on campuses. Sure, researchers for decades have highlighted the value of having different students on campuses and in workplaces. But our pursuit of diversity is often twisted and incomplete. From faking diversity to wasting its potential and to finally misunderstanding the idea completely, we have strayed far away from what it actually means to incorporate diversity in our lives. What happens when institutions stop organically nurturing an environment of diversity, but instead artificially implant the idea? Well, this is what happens. The year is 2001. The University of Wisconsin-Madison had just published their undergraduate application for the year. And that right there is the front cover of that application. It's a nice picture, right? We got a white guy, we got another white guy, we got two white girls, and we have a black guy. Yes! Diversity. Right? Well, not quite. Because here is the actual picture that was taken. Senior Diallo Shabazz was photoshopped into the cover of that application because Wisconsin-Madison didn't have a diverse enough student population. But instead of admitting to that fact, they decided to fake it. And it's not just universities that do this. Businesses and political coalitions do the exact same thing. Here is an actual picture of the Asian Republican Coalition. I love seeing that picture. When asked about this clear irony, the spokesperson said, "Well, the coalition is also for those who appreciate Asian culture." You guys, I love golf. I love hockey. I go to Whole Foods like 17 times per semester, but I have never had the audacity to claim them white. Come on, you guys can do better than that. The point is, when we fake diversity, we put a cover on the important issue of underrepresentation. It's like clicking the Remind Me Tomorrow button on a critical system update, but except that update is essential to the well-being of our institutions. And when we do have diversity, we tend to waste its potential. We all have seen colorful stats that look like this, of how many demographics we represent, how many different languages the students speak, but our pursuit of diversity usually stops right there on those cold numbers and statistics. If diversity looked like an iceberg, we really only care about the very tip of it. In 2003, researchers at the University of Connecticut conducted a research looking for relationships between perceived level of diversity and actual cross-cultural dialogue that goes on between these supposedly diverse groups. And what they found was that students don't really venture out of their demographic groups. When asked, 76% of white students said they only have white friends, whereas 56% of black students said they only have black friends. The takeaway from that study is that as students, at least, we don't really talk to each other. Those supposedly diverse groups are essentially stratified groups of self-segregated communities that never really interact with each other. And that makes me sad. I mean, what's the point of having diversity if we're just gonna let it sit there and not do anything about it? The third and final problem with our version of diversity is exactly about the understanding part. We don't really know what it is. In a hyper-racialized context of America, we think of diversity as only having the ethnic or racial dimensions. But it's much more than that. It's about recognizing and understanding that each individual is unique. But the important part here, or rather the operating word here, is understanding. We can all do the recognizing part. We all realize that each and every one of us is different from each other. But understanding those differences requires an earnest effort to bring those stratified groups together to actually communicate. But unfortunately, as a society, we are too lazy and too scared to do that. When all those three problems compound, when we have fake diversity, when we undermine its value, and when we finally misunderstand its meaning completely, diversity goes from one that is pure and vanilla to one that looks like this, one with a fine print version of it. So why do we have this cheap version of diversity? Why do we have a fine print version of this idea that we hold so dear, supposedly? Well, it's because the mere appearance of diversity generates revenue and benefits. So to look to the answer to those questions, we need to go to the causes of our problems. First, why do we fake diversity in the first place? Well, it's because the mere appearance of it generates revenue. Nancy Liang from the Denver University School of Law teaches us displaying racial diversity allows schools and companies to present themselves as inclusive and modern. And that's a trendy thing to do nowadays. For 4 years, I attended a predominantly white high school in suburban Tennessee because my parents didn't know better. And as you can imagine, Tennessee is not the most ethnically or racially or politically diverse place on earth. But my high school principal loved using that magical word, diversity, whenever he spoke during assembly. He would say things like, "Oh, our school is constantly striving for diversity and inclusion as our principles." And then whenever he said that, I would look around me and I would see 92 other white kids nodding their heads. It was really funny. But my principal loved saying that because it brought him money. It attracted international students and minority students to give him tuition. It brought him money. And it's not just schools that do this. Companies do the exact same thing. In 2003, Walmart started a diversity initiative to hire more underrepresented demographics to include them in a workplace. Which sounds awesome on paper until you realize they started doing that only after a series of class action lawsuits against their discriminatory hiring practices. I mean, they were literally putting up shields of minorities to defend against potential financial losses. Next, we undermine the power of diversity, and we also don't understand its true meaning because we are used to a bystander mentality. Americans love driving more than any other nation in the world, and your teenagers love riding shotgun more than any other nation in the world. But on the issue of diversity and inclusion, we take the back seat. A 2019 study revealed that Americans only encounter diversity mostly in their workplace and in schools. Once they enter their personal lives, however, the diversity score drops down significantly. We don't mind diversity when it's just around us. We don't mind it when we have to interact with people from different backgrounds. But when we go to churches, when we go to civic gatherings, when we go to our friend groups, we'd prefer those groups to be homogenous, whether we like to admit it or not. We think having colors around us is enough. We think just because there's someone different from me in the same room, that's enough. Well, the reality is, it's not enough. Earlier, I touched on my experience as a high schooler, a 14-year-old Chinese boy who spoke broken English in Tennessee, and my fake woke principle and my fake love for country music. I wish all the stories from my time period was as funny and lighthearted as those. But the truth is, I endured a lot of hardship in those 4 years. English was one of the most difficult things for me to overcome. I had to ask my classmates constantly to answer questions and spell out words for me. I remember asking one of my classmates, a boy in my English class, how to spell the word performance. He looked at me and he said, COMMIE. I didn't know what commie meant at the time because I didn't have the vocabulary for it. But from the way he laughed when he left the room, I knew it wasn't nice. Later that night, I went home and I called my mom. I asked her, 妈, 他们为什么不喜欢我啊? Mom, why don't they like me? She was silent. She didn't know how to respond because she was the one who told me to not talk to the Chinese kids, to distance myself from my culture. But she didn't know, no matter how hard I tried, I would still be a 14-year-old Chinese boy with broken English. It didn't matter that my principal stated his commitment to diversity. It didn't matter that my teacher said the school was accepting and welcoming. It doesn't matter what we say, it matters what we do. And what we need to do is to focus on inclusion instead of diversity. We need to stop being tunnel vision and being so obsessed with the appearance of diversity. Let's do a little thought experiment. 2 students are applying to the exact same university. They have the same SAT score, the same GPA, the same achievements outside of school as well. The only difference between these 2 applicants is their gender. One of them is male and the other one is female. Now, keep in mind the school they're applying to is predominantly male. If we blindly accept a female student just to look nice on paper and appear diverse theoretically, the female student might have a harder time adjusting to the new environment. Whereas if we admit the male student, he will have an unfair advantage because there is already a layer of familiarity in the culture inside of the school before he gets in there. From this thought experiment, we need to realize that before we want to include underrepresented demographics into our lives, we need to make sure there's a welcoming and inclusive enough environment and a culture in place to give them a fair chance at succeeding. But that's largely to the discretion of the folks above, to the administration level. What can we do as regular people to harbor and nurture diversity? Well, for one, we can stop saying stuff like non bread and chai tea. Non is bread, chai is tea. The point is, we need to take some time to learn about the culture we say we appreciate. And second, reach into the unknown. Last semester, I took an African American Studies class because I needed to fulfill a GR, a general education requirement. But that class ended up changing the way I see the world today. I challenge each and every one of you to reach into a community that you don't really interact with very often. Go to Buford Highway or go to the Cap City Mall just to take some time to interact with people we don't normally associate with. The takeaway from those interactions will be so, so valuable, I promise you. And finally, just keep in mind that each and every one of us has a story to tell. We're all unique and we're all awesome. The only way we can listen to those stories is very simple. Just close your eyes and listen. I want to close with a quote from Shelley Zales, the CEO of the Female Culture and a renowned researcher. Diversity is an action. Inclusivity is cultural. And belonging is a feeling. Diversity is a big word, but feeling, we all know. My mom's advice to not talk to the Chinese kids may have helped me with my spoken English. But please, for the love of everyone, for the sake of all of us, do talk to the Chinese kids. Thank you.